The Vice President Kamala Harris, who was the candidate of the Democratic Party in the election, has conceded victory to the U.S. President-elect Donald Trump on the campus of Howard University in Washington, D.C. She told her supporters that the result of the election and the American Constitution must be respected. But we have details in this report.
Conceding victory to President-elect Donald Trump in the U.S. 2024 presidential election, Vice President Kamala Harris offered an uplifting, positive charge to her supporters, acknowledging the painful loss, but emphasizing that the ideals they pursued for America's growth must be continuously upheld. She mentioned that she was willing, alongside her team, to help Donald Trump achieve a peaceful transition to power.
But we must accept the results of this election. Earlier today, I spoke with President-elect Trump and congratulated him on his victory. I also told him that we will help him and his team with their transition, and that we will engage in a peaceful transfer of power.
Kamala Harris, who describes herself as a joyful warrior, told her supporters to move beyond the range of emotions they are experiencing to accept the results of the election. She did not close the chapter of her defeat in the books of history without calling on her supporters to roll up their sleeves for more work. On the flip side, President-elect Donald Trump is reportedly preparing to select his top team ahead of his return to the White House. He won 5 of the 7 battleground states and is ahead in the final 2, Nevada and Arizona. Their results are yet to be declared.
And for an analysis of the U.S. election, I'm now being joined from the United States of Indianapolis, Kunle Falowo, who is a global affairs analyst and also White House correspondent of the Voice of America, Anita Powell. It's good to have you join us on The World Now.
Good morning from the White House.
Right. Let's begin with you, Kunle. What was your reaction to the news that Donald Trump is on his way to the White House? Did this come with satisfaction or perhaps a nightmare?
Interesting. It's an utter shock, absolutely a shock to a lot of Americans, particularly a lot of progressives, and you know, it's very troubling what you see. But it kind of also shows the depolarization in the polity and the essence of how the Democratic Party have been unable to quite achieve something that, you know, in their thinking, they thought that it would be something that was going to be achievable. I would say it's a rude shock to a lot of people, and it just tells you how, like I said, it's deeply polarizing. A lot of soul-searching in the Democratic Party right now, and I would say that you know, we're all Americans. We're all going to support whoever becomes the eventual president, and all the indication is showing that Donald Trump will be, and we will respect the rule of law, and anybody that the overall majority have decided that there will be, you know, be the one to lead, we will respect that wish, and, you know, we wish him well.
Right, and so many factors have been raised as some of the reasons why the Democrats lost in terms of ideology and other things that they promised to bring to the United States. But let's quickly go to Anita, who is in the White House. Anita, talk to us about the mood in the White House today and what we should expect in terms of transition, especially those we should be expecting in Trump's cabinet.
Right. So the mood in the White House today is pretty frenetic. This would be a big deal no matter who had won the election. As we know, Donald Trump is the undisputed victor. But the mood is pretty frenetic. A lot of people are asking a lot of the questions that you are asking. What's going to be next? Who's going to be on the cabinet? I don't want to make any commitments to that now because, as we know, Donald Trump shuffles his cabinet like a deck of cards. So, I think that let's hold on that one until he is in office. But yeah, the mood is quite frenetic. There are a lot of questions swirling. It's impossible, I think, in the United States or really anywhere in the world to feel neutral about Donald Trump.
And
But yeah,
right, go
go on.
ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, but I mean, I think it's interesting to me because as somebody who's covered 19 African elections, this is my first American presidential election that I've covered on the ground. His appeal is very populist. There's a big urban-rural divide in the United States that we're clearly seeing, and these aren't dissimilar from some of the issues that we face across the continent. I was mostly in southern and eastern Africa, but even so, these are commonalities in the African continent. But I would just reiterate what the other speakers so wisely said, which was this was a free and fair election, and the will of the people was expressed, and it has to be heard now.
Right. And there is a concern about how this will, influence politics, democracy in other nations in that sense, and especially with some of the promises that, Trump has put in place, some of the expectations. So how do we place this side by side, having to run a nation theoretically and actually running the nation, considering what has happened in the past?
That again is a very big and deep question. We could talk about that for hours. But I think what we need to remember is that Trump, this term, is going to be very different from Trump in his first term. He has an architecture, he has supporters, and he no longer has the proverbial quote unquote adults in the room. I'm sure you remember that New York Times editorial from several years ago where some anonymous person in the administration spoke about putting a leash on Trump and restraining him from his worst impulses. I think that is gone now. Trump's supporters and enablers are going to support him in his in his desire to be an extremely strong executive, to take a very hard and firm interpretation of Article 2 of the Constitution, which gives powers to the American executive. So we're obviously going to see knock-on effects because if the President of the United States can do something and quote unquote get away with it, then this sends a message to the rest of the world. It's clear who his friends are. He's very well supported by Viktor Orban of Hungary, who's seen as a strongman. He has a relationship with Kim Jong-un of North Korea, who again is the textbook strongman. So we are going to see other world leaders act in accordance with his behavior. He's going to set the standard.
Anita, I'm going to put you on hold for a minute. Let's go to Kunle. Kunle, the presidential election laws, as well as the party losing control of the Senate and possibly the House too, the GOP has left some Democrats angry and questioning the future of the party from the choice of Tim Walz as running mate to Kamala, failing to distance herself from the Biden performance. Some say this loss may have set the Democrats back for at least a decade. What are the hopes for the Democrats as Trump begins working on this cabinet?
Well, good question. So let's go back to history a little bit. This had happened in the Republican Party during Ronald Reagan, when the messaging of at that moment was not resonating with a lot of Americans, and I think that's where the Democratic Party is currently. It seems like a policy divide, a policy division. A lot of Americans are not in tune with the policies. The expectation initially was that the women, American women, were going to come out en masse and support Kamala, and that kind of happened, but wasn't it wasn't overwhelmingly great. Having said that, at this point, the messaging and it's not resonating with the entire Americans. Particularly Americans that are not educated. Now, college-educated Americans, well, Americans in the urban areas, in the cities, it's resonating. But the Americans in the hinterlands, which makes the bulk of the American people, are not resonating with the messaging. The uneducated Americans, the white Americans, the middle-class Americans are not getting that message. And most especially, the inflation in the current economy and in all that, what's happening economic wise right now is crushing the heart of a lot of Americans, and most especially if you look back to what Trump did in the first term in office, a lot of Americans are feeling that they were better off when Trump was in power compared to, Joe Biden, which apparently is least liked among Americans. In the last poll, they had about 40% approval rating for a sitting president, which was not very great. And this culminated into the loss that we've seen in the Democratic Party. So there's a need for a lot of soul searching for the Democratic Party moving forward and what needs to be done, the messaging, and everything all together. So it's not all hope is all lost. The measures are there. It's just everybody needs to come together and look for a way forward.
Right. Anita, please pick up that question. What does this mean for the Democrat in terms of gaining momentum ahead of future elections?
Right. Well, obviously, this is a setback, but I want to just jump on something that Kuna just said about how these were largely white voters. That's actually not demographically true. Trump picked up a lot of support among Latino and Black communities in the United States. So he actually has a broader base of support than I think just low education, low information, rural white voters, which is the stereotype, right? The numbers did not show that. He picked up support in basically every precinct across America. It was an astonishing rightward shift. That's also reflected in the House and the Senate results that we've seen. So the Democratic Party is going to have to, and I'm not giving them advice here, but they're going to, I guess, want to figure out how to be a broader church, because right now it looks like the Republican Party is a broader church for Americans who come from different backgrounds, who have different ideologies, different religions. We, of course, saw this backlash against the Biden administration and by extension a future Harris administration over the White House's support of Israel in the conflict in Gaza. That really counted in the states of Michigan and other swing states. So I think that the Democratic Party is going to have to figure out how to capture a wider swath of American public opinion, and I don't know how they're going to do that. And the other thing I just want to bring up that we haven't spoken about yet is the role of the individual at the top of the ticket and how Americans felt about the prospect of being led by a woman of color. Clearly, this was problematic for a lot of voters. And I guess the Democratic Party is going to have to figure out how to contend with that and make Americans comfortable with the idea of having women in positions of power, or just non-white men in positions of power.
Right.
And that's going to be shift.
And Harris, beyond being a representative of the Democrats, has actually pledged assistance to Donald Trump. How likely is it for her to be a key figure in the Trump cabinet?
I wouldn't bet money on that. I mean, I think she said in her concession speech that while she concedes the election, she doesn't concede the fight. I don't know if there's a role for her to fight from within the administration. I think it's probably going to be certainly less stressful for her to do it outside the administration. And I think there's a role outside the administration for her rather than inside. She memorably said that she was going to try to put a Republican on her cabinet. I don't know if we're going to see this same bipartisanship from Donald Trump, but we may.
Right. Kunle, the Israelis have said that Trump actually called them to congratulate them on their actions in Lebanon. Perhaps he has also promised to end the war in a few days. Does this seem as though the war is going to end as soon as we think, and it will not go the same way the Palestinians themselves wanted it to be resolved?
Okay, before I answer that question, let me quickly delve back to what the other speaker just mentioned about Americans and how they feel about a female leader. Well, quite interestingly, we had, which hadn't happened before, we had two persons of color get to clinch their Senate ticket currently. We have two female Black African Americans who got their ticket. So definitely there seems to be a slight shift, but there seems to be a lot of things that worked against Kamala this time. I wouldn't say maybe it wasn't more of an overall Americans not very comfortable with a female president, but maybe we're not there yet. We're not sure, but it's something to definitely think about. Now, back to your question about foreign policy. So definitely there's going to be a policy shift, and that's an interesting thing to kind of look out for, because Mr. Trump has been really talking tough about ending wars in Gaza and being able to potentially have a magical wand to end all the international foreign crisis. Um, and that will be a litmus test. How effective will he be ruling?
Right.
Um, Mr. Trump knows how to delegate, and I'm thinking that he's gonna put a cabinet together who better understands the polity and international politics, and because of the relationship that he has with other significantly fascist rulers and or potentially authoritarian figures, maybe that will play a pivotal role. Now, the isolationist agenda that he's been creating or pushing forward, will it work this time? Different strives, different measures. So
Right.
everything's up in the air, and the results will kind of tell eventually.
Right. Voice of America correspondent, White House correspondent Anita Powell, and global affairs analyst Kunle Falowo. Thank you for joining us on The World Now.
Thank you for having me.